Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to ReMarkTO, the sales marketing podcast for sales marketing professionals. My name's Dave Chomitz, and here's my partner, Addy.
Hey, everybody. My name is Addy, and today we have a special guest. His name is Mark McLean. Mark is the past president of Toronto Real Estate Board, one of the largest boards in the world. He's also a good dear friend of ReMarkTO. He's been here a couple of times before. First time on the podcast. Mark is now the senior executive with Key Living, which is a new concept in housing. Before we get started into the conversation, do us a favor, subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Join our meetup page, which you could access via www.remarkto.com. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you get your podcast from. You can watch a live video of this podcast by going to www.remarktolive.com. Without further ado, here's Mark McLean. Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you. I just want to, before we get started, get the audience acquainted with Mark McLean, who you are. And so just the floor is yours. Take a moment, give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Addy. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me again. I'm Mark McLean. I am a 30-plus year industry veteran in the real estate environment. I've been an agent and a broker for a really long time. I guess my claim to fame is that I was the guy that started Sotheby's International Realty here in Ontario. I worked as a senior manager at Bosley, which is one of the oldest, largest independent brokerages. I was there for 7 years. I ran condos.ca for about a year and a half. But I think I'm probably more well known for the fact that I was a TREB president for a year. I was also a director at large at the Ontario Real Estate Association. and I sat on a number of committees, of course, on all levels of organized real estate, all the way up to Korea. So it's been a crazy journey, and now I'm sort of basically left the real estate environment to go work with a prop tech, fintech startup that's working in the real estate space.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? That's Key Living you're talking about, am I right?
Yeah. So Key is basically our idea behind Key was to try and make real estate available for more people. So in fact, we have two bylines. One is, real estate for all, trying to create this environment where anyone can get into the real estate market. And recognizing that, I remember particularly when I was TREB president, talking to the media about home ownership and how important it was, not just because it was this idea of forced savings, but what we knew about people that owned real estate was that they were healthier, they were happier, their kids were better educated. There were so many incredible benefits that came out of home ownership. And if you couldn't own, then, because people would say, well, what if I can't own in Toronto? I would say you get in your car and you drive till you qualify. And of course, that I wish if there was anything I could take back, it would be that, because honestly, if you're driving into the city, for an hour and a half every day, you're leaving the best part of yourself in the car, right? And the same when you go home. And so there had to be a better way for people to own real estate. And quite frankly, we're all agents, so we know that for probably 100 years, we've only had two options. If you can't buy, you rent, and that's it. And so what Key really professed to do is to try and find that middle ground. Could we actually create that third option that was, had all the benefits of home owning in that you had secure tenure, that you had an equity position in it, but have the freedom and flexibility of renting where, if you didn't like it, you could leave and it wouldn't cost you anything. And so there was, because I think still probably people still rent because it's really a great thing. But I've talked to agents and I've said, how many of the clients that you're putting in rentals, you're putting there only because they had no other choice. They wanted to buy, but they're gig workers, they're self-employed, they maybe didn't have enough deposit, maybe they're new to the country, for whatever reason. So their only opportunity was to rent. And that's a huge segment of the economy. And quite frankly, I think that at the end of the day, owning should be everyone's goal. But if you can't own and you're renting, then what's happening is, wages aren't keeping up to prices. We're getting farther and farther away from owning. That goalpost is just getting farther and farther away. And that's not a way to build an environment, I don't think.
No, since we're all about real estate marketing and we want to talk about marketing and sales, we're gonna dig more deep into the key living concept because I'm really fascinated by it and I want to talk more about prop tech as well with you. But before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit more about the concept of key living and how you started it and the marketing that you have put in to get it to where it is today, because you guys have already closed a couple of transactions and you're going out there and showing properties. You just mentioned you made some hit some milestones as well. So let's start from the beginning. How did you want to position key living when you guys came up with the concept? What is it that you did? What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so we have two founders, Rob Richards, who's really the guy that was the brains behind the operation and really thinking about this for a really long time. And he works in the late stage venture capital, primarily in the real estate space. And he's just seen how these incredible inefficiencies, especially in the condo world, from how you raise the money to buy the lot, how you go through the financing process, to get to the place where you're about to build it, the commissions that are paid out, and the complete inefficiencies of how these buildings are run, and the fact, here's a simple thing, which is, if you look at a new condo building, the builder is not likely to put even something like an LED light bulb inside the suite or inside anywhere in the building, because an LED light bulb might cost $5 or an incandescent costs 50 cents. And if I'm only going to own the building for a year, what do I care? And you could say that to, green roofs and triple pane glass and geothermal and like all these different things and monitors and so on and so forth that would be great to have in a building and would ultimately save, tons and tons of money in terms of maintenance fees. But the truth is that no builder will do that. They might do one or two things here and there, but no one will do that. So Rob was really looking at the incredible inefficiencies and the fact that, for the most part, every single building that's built is built for an investor, whether they're foreign or domestic, right? And you know that because, you talk about agents who are just, running through tons and tons of transactions. They're not to end users, they're to investors. And so when you have all these people that need a place to live basically being pushed out by investors, then there's a problem. And so Rob really looked at it and said, I got to take the model, I got to flip it upside down, I got to shake it and put it back up and start. If I could start from scratch, what would it look like? And it came down to, this whole idea behind, the mortgage. And, just if I like to make this crazy comment that, the word mortgage means death pledge. And, with all these things, all these efficiencies that are now coming up within the real estate space, why are we still holding on to this, multi-hundred-year-old, system of going to the bank, borrowing money to buy a place and being locked into it with terms that we don't have really a whole lot of, flexibility on, and the banks are making all this money off us? Would there be a way to actually create an entity that would own the real estate, that could sell pieces of it and buy and sell very, very quickly? And that was essentially kind of the genesis, if you will, of what Key was. What we decided to do was to go out to long-term capital, like pension funds, wealth sovereign funds, endowment funds, big insurance companies, those big institutions that want to park their money for a really long time, raise all that money together, combine it with some bank debt, and go out and buy numbers of suites throughout the city, and basically any urban city around the world. But we'll start in Toronto because that's where we're based. And then what we do is sell a portion of each condo, 2.5% portion, to an owner resident. So I think fundamentally the crazy thing about this is, imagine two buildings side by side. Ultimately our goal is to build our own buildings, but imagine two buildings side by side. There's a normal condo building and there's a key living building. And in that normal condo building, 70, 80, 90% of the people that live there are renters. And in a key living building, 100% of the people that live there are owner residents. That just in itself just kind of blows my mind. And so that's been the genesis of the program. And if you look at even commercial, big skyscraping commercial buildings, they are owned by big corporations and they know that they're going to own them forever. So there's a huge incentive to make them like really efficient and spectacular buildings, because they're going to own them forever. They're not just building it and handing the keys off to somebody and saying, okay, see you later. they're going to own it. So there's a real incentive to make it a better building. So with us, we'll be able to do that. Again, once we build our own suites, we can take a lot of the money that the builder is saving in terms of, just doing all that bad financing and commissions and all that sort of stuff. We can throw some of that money back into the systems that will actually operate the building better, and actually have a building that's going to be smarter, healthier, cheaper to operate, and all those sort of things. And the people that live there are all owners.
I got a very interesting question for you, and it's interesting for me.
Yeah.
So are you building now? I know that you have a limited supply right now of what you're selling. Yeah. Is the long-term goal to actually become a builder developer of rental stock or condos? And I'm differentiating because things that are attractive to a condominium owner are not really attractive to a renter, and what's attractive to a renter is not really attractive to a condo owner. So which one are you focusing on?
Yeah, well, we're sort of building our own swim lane, really, in a lot of ways. So let me start by saying that we've got one investor in our company that is a huge builder in Toronto and has 4 or 5 projects who would say, I would be more than happy if you guys just took over all our projects. So ultimately, that's our goal. But that's a $2 or $3 billion finance raise. And in order for us to get there, we had to start small and scale quickly. So the game plan was always just to in the interim, while we're testing the theory, while we're making it strong and competitive and good, is to buy just existing suites. And that's what we're doing. So we got our first batch of 10 suites in mid-December. By the way, we started this in April 2019. I was employee number 2. We're now at 18, I think, right now. And we just, it's basically been lead up. And really, I think the biggest thing for me anyway is just continue to educate the realtor community, because, we wanted to stand on the shoulders of giants, recognizing that, there's no other group of people out there that have access to people who would live in our units than realtors, right? So stand on the shoulders of giants, help build up this momentum, and be able to say to agents right from the get-go, you've only had 2 options. We're not trying to disrupt ownership at all. What we're trying to do is disrupt the rental market by getting people in to be that first step of the property ladder, even if it's that first little wedge, 2.5%, is, for the most part, it's anywhere between $12,500 and, $16,000. Like it's less than a car. And the great thing about how our model works, sort of a sidetrack here, but what it allows you to do is actually put in more money at your own convenience. So for whatever reason, $5,000 falls in your lap, you could say, you know what, I'm going to put 4,000 of it into Key. And what happens? 2 things. Number one is you're actually buying more of the suite that you're living in, which is great, because as the market's appreciating, now you have a bigger pile of money that's appreciating with the market. But the other thing that it does is actually lowers your monthly payment. So that's kind of cool. Conversely, if a month goes by and you're like, damn it, I had 5,000, I put 4,000 in, I really only should have put 3,000 in, you could actually withdraw $1,000 and your monthly payment would just tick up a tiny bit. So it's got this kind of HELOC component to our model, and it's actually something that we patented. So that's essentially gives you kind of like the financial component of our market, and the monthly payment is really geared to market rent. And I could go into technicalities, but you get a 2.5% discount in the market rent that you pay because you put in 2.5% of the value. Okay. Conversely, the long-term capital, the pension funds, sovereign funds, they get a similar bump, that 2.5% bump, but they get it in the form of a dividend. So everyone's on the same level.
So is this a fund structure that you have for it?
Yeah, it's like a mutual fund structure.
It's a mutual fund. So the 2.5% that they're investing in, they're basically getting trust units for it, or mutual funds.
Your 2.5% is tied not to the overall trust, but to the unit that you're in. So
okay, so it's a local LP, basically. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So if your condo goes up, 5%, then your 12,500 that you put in goes up 5%.
Interesting. So now you have the concept. How did you go about marketing this concept and finding the end users and connecting all the dots now?
Yeah. So crazy story. So we knew that we had to test our theory. And as I said, one of our principal investors, luckily enough, had or has a REIT with about 70 units in it. And he said to us, when the time is right, I will sell you my REIT. That'll give you 70 units to start off, test your theories, and make it work. And so that's fantastic, right? So, what a great way to start. And we've been talking to other small family offices with multiple suites, and being able to engage with them early to say, when the time's right, we want to buy it, and this is what we want to do, and building up that sort of momentum. Interestingly enough, in probably beginning of November, that company that owned the REIT had said to us, we have a really interesting situation. We have 68, 70 units, whatever. We have 20 that are vacant as a result of pandemic, right? And so what we'd like you to do, what we're prepared to do, is give you those 20 units, and you run a synthetic model of what you're operating. Key is run the synthetic version of it. And when you finally do your raise, you can buy those units. But in the meantime, we'll just do it as a sort of a synthetic version. So they gave us the 10 suites right away. And within by the time we hammered out all the details, we got the keys in mid-December, the worst time. And but within a month, we'd had 8 done. We sold 8. So we had our first guy move in January. We have a couple moving in, I think 2 moving in February, and 4 moving in March. So it's like, it's going crazy. And where we are right now, which I honestly never thought in a million years that we would have this situation. I mean, I thought that we would be in a situation where we'd have more demand than supply. I knew that we would be there, because I knew that we're onto something really, really great, but I didn't expect it would happen within a month. Like we are now, we've got more people waiting for big, 2-bedroom and dens than we even have. Like we have none of that. So, I'm busy out there just trying to rustle up those kind of units and try and make deals with people. By the way, we're still in that sort of fundraising mode. So so the deal that we made with the REIT was that, as I said, that's this kind of synthetic version where people are just going in, and we hope that we'll finish our fundraising by the summer. It's at that point that we sort of turn on the economic engine of our machine. It's at that point that the owner resident gives us their 2.5%. And it's at that point that this whole thing starts to sort of take off.
I love the answer, but I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper, because you're talking the REIT coming in November 2020, but you started back in April 2019.
Yeah. So
I want to know, how did you get, because this is a big boulder that you're pushing up the hill. So what are the different steps you were taking to get this thing started? Because it's a big engine to start, and I can appreciate what you have gone through. So can you give us a bit of a pointers on how you got the marketing? Like, how did you connect the dots to get to the point where somebody's saying, here, there's 20 units for you?
Well, don't forget that, to do this is not like, 3 guys sitting in their basement over a couple of beers trying to figure out how to rewrite the real estate industry. Okay. These are guys with a ton of knowledge and wherewithal in the real estate space. So Rob Richards, late stage venture capitalist in the real estate space. Daniel Dubois ran Airbnb Canada and the Eastern Seaboard. Our CFO was the head of real estate for one of the biggest banks in Canada. So we were always kind of working this. So there were different angles of it. So there was a bunch of angles with regard to how do we, first of all, we have to go out and raise money, right? We were lucky enough to have some family offices who believed in what we were doing in that early startup mode. And we put together, $10-20 million just to keep the doors open and do all that sort of stuff. So I have nothing to do with that, but that in itself is a challenge, right? Because you're saying to people, we have this crazy idea, and Dave would know when I first talked about Key, we had actually a slightly different ownership structure, which wasn't really tax fair, but so we've changed it. The goals are the same, but how we did it is different. Side note. So we have one section of the group that is trying to raise the money for this big raise pre-pandemic. So so there's a lot of money floating around out there in the sort of prop tech space. And then what I'm doing is I'm working on the realtor angle, calling up realtors, just having one-on-one conversations. Hey, this is what I'm doing. What do you think? And doing office presentations and hosting events where we get 70, 80, 90 agents together, and we do a presentation. Just like, get your head around this idea, right? Because if we want to do that, we want to do what we want to do, and we want to work with this giant realtor community and get real ambassadors. Then we have to, educate them. So that was really kind of my job. And then we had other people, and then later in the stage, we knew that we needed marketing because we were just sort of working on, how we had a couple of people that were jobbers, basically helping us build our marketing material. And then we hired a chief marketing officer who actually came from like Rogers and Holt Renfrew and Toronto Stock Exchange, big person. And then she brought on her team. And then we added to our finance team, we added to our real estate equity team. And we just continue just to do that. When the pandemic hit, we were working out of a big office downtown, a Spaces office, and we said, okay, our challenge is that we don't know where this is going to go, and this is trying to operate in a pandemic as a startup is like super challenging, and it's amazing. I think it's the perseverance that we've shown to work our way through that. Is exemplary. And so, we decided, okay, we're going to leave our offices. We're all going to move home. We're going to just continue to do that. And, we really took a bite. We all reduced our salaries big time. We all just hunkered down and just tried to survive, right? One of the first rules of pandemic is survive for the rebound, because it's going to happen, right? So that's what we did. And in the meantime, we changed our logo, and we changed colors, and we hired, outside people to help us with the branding. And now we just hired a PR company, and then we hired a couple people to help us on the GR front, because quite frankly, you've got to get the whole entire government organization on all levels to buy into what you're doing, right? And so that's municipal, provincial, and federal. And I'm happy to say that we've made incredible headway with organizations like CMHC. We made incredible headway with our counterparts at the provincial level in the housing and in municipal levels, because we're talking about, how do we deal with land transfer issues? How do we deal with, all these tax issues and RRSP contributions and all these sort of things? So huge team. So our initial investors said to us, we're prepared to give you more money, but you got to do what you got to do, which is, okay, cut their wages, give up our office space, tighten our belts, do all those sort of things. And, they saw that our commitment to really, moving the needle was really strong. And quite frankly, what we're building it's such an audacious moonshot to be able to take a whole entire category of housing and flip it upside down and start from scratch. And that's, I think that's what we're doing. And now that we have units and we're building that momentum, I think that we're going to get to that place where we're doing, 1,000 to 2,000 deals in Toronto every year.
I believe that. It was interesting, Mark, when we were preparing for this podcast. Yeah. I didn't even know what to call what you were doing. Like what kind of business it was. It's totally unique and new. Absolutely.
Well, so what we call it is co-equity. And I think that, the reality is, again, this sort of sidetracking, but, for realtors, we've only known buying and selling and renting. Mm-hmm. Right? So there are a host of things that are sort of in between that we don't really know too much about, which is kind of weird. But as we get into the situation where more and more people are struggling to get in, we see billions of dollars in Wall Street money and Silicon Valley money trying to solve that. So it's not just co-equity like we are. It is co-ownership, which we're starting to see, especially in Toronto, where let's say two couples go in and buy a duplex together, right? That's a classic example of co-owning. And then you see you see rent to own. That seems to be something that's been around for a while. And our model, I think, is a bit opposite to rent to own, because what it says is, if market rent's 2,000, you pay 2,500, 500 goes into the kitty. When you save for your 5% deposit and you qualify for a mortgage, then you get into this ownership position. You see fractional, again, that seems to be more in sort of vacation places. And then you see co-living, which is, again, kind of like people living in little tiny boxes that have a bedroom, a desk, a TV, a bathroom, and a tiny little, microwave or whatever. But you're doing all your living outside your suite, right? So that's co-living. So we're just another version of that, and trying to get the agent to say, you know what, if your client can't afford to buy, rather than just dusting them off or throwing them in a rental. Like, let's find other ways that we can actually help them, because truthfully, we as realtors, we should be thinking long-term, right? What can I do today that may not pay off for 5 years, but will pay off because I'm giving that person really what they want. And for the realtor, people call us for one reason: they need a place to live. That's it. That's the only reason. If they didn't need a place to live, we would all be out of business. So let's solve for that any way we can by thinking outside the box. I mean, it's kind of a stupid thing to say, but thinking differently to say, hey, you know what? You don't fit into the traditional ownership box because you don't make enough money, or you're new to the country, or you're this or you're that, or, I mean, if you're self-employed, you do everything in your power to get your income down to zero so you don't pay taxes. The bad news is the bank looks at that and says, well, you made zero. So we're not giving you any money, right?
So Mark, just from an airplane view down, just because a lot of folks won't understand the concept totally. And when you use the word co-equity, to me, and again, it's my use of the word, I think of as equity as an incorrect way, as I understand now. So if someone comes to you and they say, one of those people, I can't afford a home, I want to live in Toronto, I've got 2.5% as I can contribute to the purchase of something. They give you that money, and then those dollars are associated with a suite that they pick out that you have available, right? And this is how I understand. You told me when I hit when I hit a bumper along the road. So then they live in that suite. The rents are set to market rent initially.
Correct.
And the as time goes on and as the unit appreciates, the person who is the owner tenant, or if that's the right word you're using, they enjoy 2.5% of the appreciation of the property. So they're building greater value, and like their owners. See, this is what I don't know what the right word is. Their equity is where we're using for it, increases as well.
You're almost there. Okay. You're almost there. So let's use a really simple example. The condo that you move into is a $500,000 condo. You put 2.5% down. That's your minimum. You can put more, by the way. You can put more, but 2.5 is your minimum. $12,500. And over the course of 5 years, again, just round numbers, that condo goes to $1 million. Your $12,500 is now $25,000.
Okay, and there's a mathematical way to get there somehow.
Well,
yeah, right.
It's gone up. It's gone up at the same increments, right? It's the property's doubled, so your investment is doubled. That's the math on that. The other, it's actually done a little bit better than that, because quite frankly, what $50 of your monthly payment goes towards equity. So that's $100 a year. So again, over 5 years, you're up another $3,000. So what the idea really here is not to, what I say to agents, by the way, is if you have a client that can buy, that has a good job, has good credit, has a deposit, has the closing costs, going to be there for a while, 100% you should be selling them something, 100%. Mm-hmm. But if their only other option is to rent because of a couple of things that don't fall into place, then our model is really the way to go.
No, and I agree totally. So during that 5-year period when they're there, their rent it sounds like the rent's pretty much fixed at what they've got in at.
Yeah. So how the technical aspect of it is that you are paying an owner resident a residency fee that, as I say, is tied to market, more or less. It's slightly reduced, and for 4 years that fee is fixed, except for the things that we're not in control of, because that money that we collect goes towards taxes, maintenance fees, and that portion that would normally be mortgage, right? That's how we kind of make our money as well. So if the taxes and the maintenance fee goes up, then that gets passed along to you.
Okay, so then initially the rent doesn't, they pay the rent, but they don't have to pay the monthly common fees for the condo?
So you're paying one number,
right?
Let's say $2,000 a month, and then we collect that $2,000. We pay the maintenance fee, we pay the taxes, and if there's heating, we pay the heating, or whatever, and that's it. Just like you would do for a mortgage. Classic example, the best way to describe it is that I actually have there was a gal who lives in one of the buildings that we have units in, and she said very, very early on, had I known that your model would existed, I would have just bought. I would have sort of gone into that model. I mean, we weren't prepared, but she said, I would have loved to stretch to the limit on this mortgage. I'm tied down to it. I can't even break it because it's the term, like the break fee is like 20 grand or something like that. Just go to B lender with the terrible rates. And so what we propose to do is that we would actually buy her out of her unit. So right now she's paying $19.15 a month just on the mortgage. Then she pays taxes and maintenance fees. And we did the math on that particular unit. And if we bought her out, but she left her 2.5% in, she would be paying $19.66 all in. So she would be, it would be cost her less. And on a, now obviously she's not getting that huge lift off that having a mortgage allows you to do. But, for her, she's like, I want to travel. I want to do stuff. I don't want to be locked into something. And the great thing about our model is 2 months, 6 months in, you're like, what, this is not working for me. You give us notice. And if your thing has even gone up by a couple of $1,000, we give you the new value.
I read that on the website.
I have two questions based on this. So is there a term for the lease? And the second is, what happens if the property, like a lot of the assumptions that you have is the property value keeps on going up. What happens if the property value drops?
Yeah. So if the property value drops, so does your 2.5% because you're tied to it. The great news is that, if you bought a $2 million house and the property value dropped 10%, that's a painful $200,000 drop, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our model, if it 10% drop, you've lost $1,200, but you still have a place to live. So it's not like really a horrible thing. And you're not locked into any term whatsoever. You just give us, I say 60 days, it's actually 75 days. That's just kind of a weird thing on how we calculate values and stuff like that, but it's 60 days. But we think that we can actually get that down to 45 days. So you give us 45 days notice, I'm leaving, and and the day you leave, that money gets transferred into your bank account. By the way, as we scale, and the other thing that we've patented is this ability to move within our model. So if you're living in a condo downtown, and you're in a 1-bedroom, but life is good and you want to move into a 2-bedroom, if one is available, you just click a button. Provided you've got the new equity, you can just move upstairs. Cost you nothing, okay? Or you could move to another building. So you get a job, that's closer to the airport and you want to move up to Yonge and Finch, you could do that. And then eventually, again, as we scale, you'll be able to go out to Vancouver. And by the way, I get a call a week, I would say, from someone who says, when are you doing this in Vancouver? But you could go to Vancouver, you could go to Montreal, you could go to Austin, Texas, you could go to San Francisco, New York, like any places where we have a key building, you'll be able to do that under our model and just have it sort of an effortless move.
So you're still planning on just doing it as buildings? Any plans on single family homes?
No, not right now. It's a possibility. In fact, one of the things that we have explored is a self-directed option, which means that all our buildings are downtown. But what about the person who wants to live in Etobicoke or Scarborough or Mississauga or New York region? And so we sort of played with this idea that we would have 30 people that could jump into this sort of self-directed option, which meant that we would look at a building that they want. It would have to be a condo. If they wanted to move to Mississauga, we would have to go and they would look at a unit. They'd say, this is the unit that I want. And we'd essentially buy it for them. And they would give us a 2.5. But that comes with some caveats. We want to make sure that the building has a reputable builder, that it's pretty new, that's got a good reserve fund, no lawsuits. We want to make sure that there's a healthy mix of renters and owners. We want to make sure that the rents cover, have a relationship to market values. So there's a lot of work, and we've had a couple of people say, I want to live in this building, and we said, no, that's not going to work. So anyway, but we're not there because I'm trying to say to people like, yeah, you can do that, but you may not be able to move for a year and a half because we're still, we're just doing this in bite-sized pieces right now.
So Mark, do you see people living in the building, being key people forever, or do you see it as people using it as a stepping stone to build that equity so that they can raise enough cash to get a place of their own?
Such a great question. And, I would say ideally our perfect person is someone that goes in for 3 to 4 years. And in that time, they're building their equity. They're, maybe fixing their credit. They're doing a bunch of things, but they're saving hard to get out of the system so that they can buy in the traditional world. So I think that it's kind of 3 to 5 years probably for the most people. But I do think that there will be some people that will want to be there forever. And
I can
so
see that
those
too.
thinking about more are maybe, let's say, retirees. So people who sell their house and they want to move. They don't want to put hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million into a property. They want to maybe look at it differently. And so we've talked to people who said, when you finish building your building, I'll take the penthouse. I'm going to drop $200,000-$300,000 into it. fix my monthly payment at something reasonable, and then take the balance of my equity out of my house, and I'm going to buy a cottage. I'll make that my principal residence. Blah blah blah. So the great thing about really our model is that the unit that you choose is yours for life, unless you're delinquent or destructive. It's like yours. You don't have to worry about the landlord kicking you out, and it's just something I think about all the time.
That's amazing.
So I'm really curious, like, as you can see, I'm like with all the questions that I have. So two things. Now that you're here, you got the boulder up the hill, and you're just scaling for the second hill now.
Yeah.
What would you do differently in the past year and a half that you have done? If there was one thing that you could do differently, what would that be?
So I think we would all agree that what we should have done is used our initial time to do the smaller raise to buy the REIT to get going and get this thing off the ground sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was, but we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, right? Like we were just shooting for the stars, right? We was like, okay, our biggest raise is going to be, it was $400 million, I think it was. And quite frankly, kind of a funny journey. You go to the big banks and you say, hey, this is what we want to do. This is our team. We got a great team. This is all our homework. We spent so much time just building a white paper and a data room with everything you could imagine in it. And the banks, they're Canadian banks, so they are, they are what they are, right? And so they we like it, but we're not risk takers, right? But we were lucky enough to have two of the biggest banks in the United States say, we like what you're doing. We think that this is really cool. And so for 4 or 5 months before the pandemic, we had two of the biggest banks in the United States doing our capital raise for us, which is really exciting. And then when the pandemic hit, it was again game changer, change of pace. If anything, the pandemic really strengthened our resolve, because what we were seeing was this challenge and this kind of worry that we were going to see the hollowing out of our city, where people that we needed to have in our city the most, and I'm talking about nurses and teachers and other frontline workers and basically anybody that didn't make $300,000 a year or $200,000 a year, having to leave the city and create a ghost town. So what we knew about what we were doing with it was we were on the right track, that we were actually helping. And yesterday we had one of our key holders doing a design consult with our team. She's a grade 5 school teacher, which is great to have that kind of people, those kind of people coming into our market. So we knew we were on the right track when that happened. So yeah, I think that probably just, again, going back to your question, if we could do it again, start smaller, have smaller goals, try to get the MVP, that minimum viable product, get that going, just 2, 3, 4 units. Could we even do 1 unit with this model, and then sort of prove it? So, yeah.
So lesson to learn from there is start small, just get the small humps out of the way, create milestones from there. Now, I keep thinking that you have all of these properties now, and they're in different buildings. How are you keeping track of them? You're a big believer in prop tech. So for everybody that doesn't know, prop tech means property technologies. And what type of technology do you have implemented? If you have any implemented, can you give us a little rundown on that?
Yeah, for sure. So we were using like a CRM before, but we've actually integrated a whole new CRM that we are, really just learning on the fly. I kind of like to joke that we are building an airplane while it's flying, but at least we are going in the right direction. So that's something. But we got on to HubSpot about a month ago. That is helping us filter our leads from social media channels, from our personal emails. Our website is collecting leads just through signups. And so just trying to stay on top of that. What I know from my past jobs running real estate companies is that, when someone calls you, when you get a cold lead, it takes 8 or 9 calls for them to warm up, right? With our model, it's taking probably 3 or 4, but you got to be persistent, right? And I was doing Facebook ads, and other people in our team were doing Facebook ads, and we all had different messages, and we were seeing which ones worked. And I'm a big believer in just telling the truth, and so people would call and say, I don't, what is it that you're trying to do? I don't get it. And just having an opportunity to get on the phone with them. We use, Zoom. I use, Google Meets just to have face-to-face, because I think that ultimately, I think that my success came from the fact that I'm a great storyteller, that I've always been able to kind of look at how the industry has behaved in the past, where it is now, and where I think it's going to go based on sort of projections. And, I think that has helped us in a lot of ways, helped me in my journey, at least talking to realtors. And quite frankly, in all the things that we're seeing right now in this world, in terms of buying and selling properties and how agents are interacting with, virtual tours and all that sort of stuff, what hasn't changed is this idea of the mortgage. The mortgage has not changed. There's not there's been zero kind of monstrous changes in terms of like how people are getting mortgages. You still have to go to the bank. You still have to talk to a mortgage broker. You still have to qualify. You have to have a certain FICO score or whatever your credit score is. You have to go through this whole ugly process. And listen, I'm just going through it now. It's actually not too bad. But in the last, 10 years or so, every time I bought a new house, I have reduced my loan to value, like I'm down to like maybe 30% right now. And it seems like every time I've moved, it's been harder, even with the job, even with, all those things, it's been harder and harder and harder. And what we know from the data is that if you ask a millennial, what's the thing that's stressing them out the most about buying real estate, they'd say having to apply for a mortgage. That's the ugly truth. So, there are definitely brokers out there who, make it fantastic, but it doesn't change the fact that if you don't have a job, or you don't have a certain credit score, or, you're self-employed or whatever, you're out of luck.
Especially in a market where values are so high.
Yeah.
It's a never reach proposition, right? It's a never reach proposition. I've got a couple of kids that are looking at that, and it's absolutely true. Yeah. It makes it's really difficult. One question, Mark, very quickly. I'm assuming, and again, you tell me where I'm wrong about this, I'm assuming that there are tax implications for someone when they cash in. This wouldn't be capital, but this isn't considered. This be considered a capital gain, right?
So under the old model, it was what we thought. On our old model, our sort of thought process was that you would buy into an organization that held all the real estate, and then you would kind of pledge your shares to effectively gain occupancy, and that's what you may remember. But since we've changed it, we've tied the equity to the unit. And we've made great headways in that. This is considered now your primary residence.
Ooh,
so when you leave, there's no tax. So
excellent.
That's the good news. Yeah.
That's great. Another question you were mentioning technology. Trev recently signed an agreement in regards to blockchain and a couple of other things with the company called T3. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's, it's interesting. And this is kind of how my journey to Keys started, was because, I was really thinking a lot about, how things like blockchain were going to change how normal people would buy real estate. I was thinking particularly about STOs. All right, securitized tokens, and how this sort of tokenization of real estate was going to go. And that's like a whole other sidebar of real estate. And it's like so complicated, so convoluted. People think Bitcoin and all these sort of things that happen. But blockchain is just a different creature. And I'm thinking about particularly what I see in real estate. And I think maybe that's where Trev is working towards sort of smart contracts and using blockchain to really lock in a lot of details. So I think I thought about this democratization of real estate, which was how can, will we see this idea behind individual, how to put this, categories being broken up into little bite-sized pieces? Like, could I invest in Yonge Street? Could I, would there be a company that would buy everything up Yonge Street, and I could buy a $500 piece of Yonge Street, and I could put $300 into it or $200 into it, and really open up, real estate to just the average person. So that's how I was really thinking about the sort of democratization of real estate and how I thought the world was going to kind of move in that direction. So I think it's inevitable that that we'll see a lot of these kind of changes over. It's going to take a really long time, I feel, and I'll tell you where I believe that we could go in something like commissions without saying without mentioning numbers or anything like that. But imagine I sell a house and I say my commission is going to be divided up like this. If you show my unit, you get a little tiny slice. And if you bring me an offer, you get a bigger slice. And if you tell me what you think the thing is going to sell for, I'm going to give you a slice that will grow on how close you are to the actual sale price. And so that can only be done through things like smart contracts and blockchain. So I think we're going to get into that place yet. And whoever unlocks the key to that, man, oh man, that's going to be something else. So, I mean, these are the things that I keep me up at night. I come up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my God, that's such a great idea. I don't have the time for it though.
What about your properties? Do you have any technology that you're using in your property, how to manage making it smarter homes?
So it's a great question. And so at the heart of what we're building out, and so the people that are actually coming onto our into our model right now, they are really the innovators, right? They get it, that they're going to be part of something really great. And so imagine when you'll be able to access everything on your phone. So what you'll see is you'll be able to do your home search. I'm going to go to Key. I'm going to pick a suite. I'm going to look at the views. I'm going to look floor plans. We already have mock digital staging and all that sort of stuff, so you can see all that. But imagine saying, looking at the numbers and saying, okay, this unit is $2,000 a month. I'm going to have to put $14,000 down. But what happens if I put $2,100? Where would I be in 5 years? So we'll have all those things. And on a regular basis, every month, you can open up your phone and you can see where your equity has gone up or gone down. I mean, just imagine how many people would love being able to open up an app on their phone and know exactly what the value of their home is on a given day. Like that to me is, whether it's gone up or down, I'd still like to know that. So, and in fact, when I was at Treb, I was pushing for, something that would do something like that, where I could, as a member of the public, I could type my home into a box and I could say, I upgraded my kitchen, I spent 60 grand. I dug the basement out, I spent, 100 grand. I did this, and it would just plop out based on how the real estate market has been in that neighborhood, plus those things, plus depreciation, plus, and spitting out a value that was, within $5,000. I just think that's going to be crazy. So that's a huge part of what we're building. And then we are building, because we're actually making our money off a lot of side services. So for instance, you're out late with your friends and you realize, God, I have to go home and feed and walk the dog. I could open up my app, push a button, someone go in through smart locks, take the dog out for a walk, feed it, play with it, and charge you $20. I want to have my apartment cleaned. I want to schedule maintenance. I want to have my dry cleaning picked up, my food delivered. I could do all that sort of stuff. And then again, as we build out more and more of our model, we see integration into, something along the lines of Airbnb, where, you just give us notice that you were leaving for a long weekend. We would go in, clean the unit, welcome the guests, give them, white glove treatment, show them around, monitor who's going in and out, making sure that they have government ID, all those sort of things. And then when the guest leaves, we go back in, we clean the apartment, you walk in and you found that your account has been topped up $500 or $600. So we're working towards those sort of technologies, but it's baby steps.
What about property maintenance?
Property maintenance, what we think is that you'll at least have the ability to change the lighting and the heating and draw the curtains and do all those sort of things electronically. So we'll get to that. Again, it's, we just delivered our first 8 suites. So
baby steps.
Come back in a year and let's see where we're at.
Well, that's a good segue. So Mark, this is just amazing. Like I had so much fun recording this. Thank you very much for jumping on this call and going over this. I know I took like so many notes down. I definitely will have some questions that I will run by you afterwards. Dave, do you want to add something to this?
I just want to say thanks, Mark, for giving us your time, and we will invite you back in a year. It's
right.
I can't. What you're doing is so innovative. It's just fascinating to watch. I looking forward to it. I wish you nothing but the best. It's just fantastic.
Thank you. I think that if we're going to solve, housing problems, we can't. There's not one thing that we can fix in the process of building a condo. Like you can't just fix one thing. You've got to fix 20 things. And so, that's what we're really striving to do. As I say, it's an audacious kind of moonshot, but you know what? They put someone, they're landing stuff on Mars.
Right now.
So, we can build a condo that is going to be cheaper, better, healthier, happier, build community, do all those sort of fun things within our model that's never been done before.
Oh, this is amazing. Thank you very much, Mark, jumping on this. Thank you for all the information. And to all our listeners, Mark, do you want to just share with them how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can go to our Key website, which is lifeatkey.com. And I'm at Mark, M-A-R-K, at lifeatkey.com.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And we're looking forward to having you back here soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Dave.
Oh, I can't do it, Addy. That's just absolutely amazing.
Oh my God, I had so many questions, and Mark is such a professional and so knowledgeable. I am really blown away by the concept that they're bringing to the market. I had no idea.
It's amazing to think, Addy, that you and I both know someone that's actually creating a whole new asset class in the world. I mean, to think that they could patent part of this is just unbelievable to me. But to think that far, I want to use the word out of the box, but to be that much of an innovator, to see opportunity where no one else has seen opportunity ever before, it's just unbelievable. Like Toronto, the Toronto real estate market is one thing. People can say, it's unaffordable, it's become unaffordable. And it is, there's no question about that. But New York and Hong Kong, and there's so many other markets, Los Angeles, so many other markets are so far ahead of Toronto in terms of price and availability and affordability. To think that no one else ever thought of this, it's just unbelievable, unbelievable to me.
It blows me away. We were having a conversation even after the podcast was recorded, and my comment to him about blockchain and talking about that and his thought process behind it, I'm just blown away. I really love the fact that we dug in and we talked about how he got to the 10 units that he has now. Because to me, that progression, that pushing that rock up the hill to get to those 10 units, that 1.5 years of slog is priceless to me, because that's where you're putting the really hard work in. And then for him to turn around and say, the one thing that I should have done first is actually concentrate on the small things rather than going after the big fish. Priceless. It's really, really good information that he shared. And I think anybody that is listening to this can take something from it and apply it in their business. Go for the small things, do them regularly, do it over and over. And once you get proficient at it, then you can go after the big things. The big things will come automatically because you start gaining momentum.
I agree totally, Addy, and that's the message. I hope doesn't get lost in the shuffle here. It's a fantastic concept. It's a wonderful idea, and it's really exciting to talk about. But more important than that is, it would still be 2 or 3 guys sitting in the rec room having a beer, trying to figure out how to make it work if they didn't approach it with a method and a plan and stay true to that plan and then adjust. Because when Mark did a talk for a group that I belonged to about 6 months ago, and it was a little bit different story. Like, it's evolved since then, right? They're taking a step, then they're stepping back and measuring their progress. They're taking another step, and it's just, anybody can build a business that way. It's the perfect way to build a business.
And I love it that Mark, when he was going through progression, I don't know if you saw that, he talked about more people that they were adding throughout the process. They didn't talk about bringing a new product or something else. It was, we have the concept. This is well written. This is what we need to execute. Who can we bring in that can help us get to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, until they actually have their 10 units now. And 8 of them sold in the first month. These are properties where they were having trouble renting out, were able to sell them. So you had investors coming with 2.5% down, and they bought into the project. Amazing. What a success story. And this is very preliminary right now. It's coming.
And you're really excited about it, Addy. I think that's so good. I think that's so cool. From a sales and marketing perspective, it looked like a big picture, but really it's a lot of small pieces. Mm-hmm. A lot of really small pieces that go together to make that picture up. And they've approached it with such logic that it's faultless. And anyone can start their own mortgage business doing exactly the same steps, or their own real estate business, or their furniture sales business. Anybody who's in sales should be taking these same basic steps and doing them over and over again, measuring as you go and adjusting, and you'll only find success if you keep your eye on the target.
I'm looking forward to having him back soon.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you could take a moment and leave us a 5-star review along with a comment, you can access us via remarkto.com, which is our meetup page. You can watch a video of this podcast live at remarktolive.com, or you could subscribe to us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and get our podcast wherever podcasts are sold. Take care, and we will see you next month.
All the best.
Bye, Dave.